But when it really comes down to it, when it's a question of whether U.S. military power will be exerted on behalf of a foreign country thousands of miles from here, they are all in, and anyone who stands in the way will be destroyed.
So Tucker Carlson recently went on Steve Bannon's podcast to talk a little bit about his opposition to U.S. involvement in another war, another forever war, as it seems to be, especially at a time where Trump is essentially openly calling for regime change on Truth Social. So let's see what he has to say and what he highlights about the destructive nature of empire building in general. So let's watch and let's react. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Things move inexorably toward what they're moving to now, which is full-scale war that includes lots of other countries.
Why are you in town? You're going to spend a couple of days in town, which is quite...
I'm interviewing various people. The president's gone, but I'm seeing a bunch of people, and there's a lot going on, and I feel like there aren't many people representing the, hey, let's have less violence and focus on America's side of things, so it's worth coming just to say that out loud. Of course, you're hated for it. It's crazy how the people who are against killing are the criminals all of a sudden. It's wild. And I thought the other day, this is accelerating, and I was hearing all this, going to war with Iran, and part of me was like, oh, we're not really going to do that. After we have this election whose core point was, hey, can we just pay attention to this amazing nation that we have that's suffering, and people are taking loans out to buy groceries, and we need attention and money.
And micropayments. They buy now and they pay micropayments over time.
For food. But hey, let's pay for somebody else's missile defense. No. So I start to hear this stuff, and I'm like, this can't be real. But then it becomes obvious to me that it is real, and I think that is the last conversation I want to be part of. I have zero interest in this conversation at all. I know it's all downside for me. It's not like I'm going to get rich and make more friends trying to stop.
But why?
Yeah, this is disastrous. To get embroiled in another Middle Eastern war that could be a regime change because Trump is tweeting about it now and flirting with that and has already initiated strikes on 3 nuclear facilities there. There's some, indications that maybe weaponry or materials were moved out ahead of time. There were a lot of trucks in certain places. And it really seems like this intel that says that they're now weeks away from acquiring a nuclear bomb was kind of manufactured and astroturfed there and at the very end, and seemed to at least partially contradict what Tulsi Gabbard said about 2 months ago in her annual threat assessment report. So yeah, Tucker's right. I think a lot of people got duped. A lot of America First Trumpers did not expect this to happen, but really when you look at it, Trump's MAGA coalition is not that tightly aligned on foreign policy. There are a lot of dissidents that chose to support Trump, chose to be part of his movement, and then there's the faithful that will do whatever he says, no matter what, whatever he does. They'll justify it as 4D chess, says, trust the plan, they'll say all the time. Same things that maybe the establishment left did with Obama. I see similar phenomenons there. And then there's people caught up in the middle of that. This is going to create a rift and schism that I've talked about in other videos. I think will jeopardize the rest of his agenda, which includes domestic matters that Tucker is alluding to now. So
why is the argument that you're making? I'm making a slightly different argument, but it's Trinity. Why are you being vilified? So we just had Tom Cotton. We played clips before you got here. We had Mark Levin, Tom Cotton, and we had Bibi. Bibi said last night to Brent Baer, "Oh, it's 12 to 13 months away from the bomb was supposed to be on Friday or Saturday." Now he's telling Brent Baer on Sunday, really, we got intelligence, but it's 12 to 13 months away, which is something they've been saying forever.
It's so funny that Bibi's more honest about it than his water carriers here in the United States.
That's the most ironic thing. Netanyahu has been talking about that Iran is months and days and weeks away, in 30 different examples, lots of memes passed around the internet. You can verify those. A lot of them are accurate, going back to 1992, because he was in a position that he always wanted regime change with Iran, and he couldn't say that they have no nuclear weapons because that doesn't drum up the propaganda and support for this war. And he can't say they have nuclear weapons because North Korea has nuclear weapons. It kind of takes regime change off the table to some extent, at least when it comes to the viability of it and how you can sell it. So he's been locked in that slot for 30 years, 30 plus years of saying, they're weeks away, they're months away. And Tulsi Gabbard seems to have jumped on board with that. Just 2 days ago, one day before the strikes happened from the U.S. So, yeah, this has been going on forever.
Like, you would never get Barry Weiss or Tom Cotton to admit that.
Well, Tom Cotton took a shot. He said,
he's mad at Bibi now. Bibi's
no. He took a shot.
Bibi's not pro-Israel enough.
He took a shot to saying podcasters and influencers, right, or don't have the accountability, the responsibility here.
Yes, I really try. I've spent a lot of my life being cruel and really cruel, and I'll have to answer for that someday, and at times dishonest.
What do you mean cruel?
Just going after people's weaknesses. No, that's my instinct always. I mean, I grew up as a debater, and I'm nasty in some ways. And so I look at some of the players in this whom I've known since they got to Washington, since, again, I'm from here. Had breakfast at the Metropolitan Club this morning, alone. And, no, this is like my city, right? My dad worked for the government. This is where we're from. And I look at these people who I've known since they, came in from the provinces, including the senator you mentioned, who's from a state I used to live in. And you could really be mean about it, and they are mean. They've attacked my family and all this stuff a lot, but I'm trying not to respond that way. My interest is really simple. I don't want the United States enmeshed in another Middle Eastern war that doesn't serve our interests. I saw that last time. I covered that war. I had a friend killed in that war.
Talk about Iraq, because Iraq is some of the same voices at the Fox platform
the Fox platform is just, it's so disgraceful. There's so many good people at Fox. I worked for the Murdochs for, all in over 20 years. I always liked them. I like them now. I'm not attacking them personally, and tons of people at Fox are my friends. And there's a lot about Fox that I love. And they were kind to me, always. Even when they fired me, they were nice. I just want to say that. But the one theme that runs longitudinally through the history of Fox is the promotion of wars that don't help the United States. And I don't know...
Why is that?
It's the owners are committed to that vision.
Yeah, that's certainly true. The Murdochs are. The Murdochs basically have supported every single war. And even during Trump's rise, it seemed like Fox News was very adversarial toward Trump. They put Megyn Kelly, who was not a fan of Trump, up as their debate moderator at the time. There were several infamous examples and clips. I know some of you probably remember that, where, she asked very adversarial questions to him. And that was was that in 2016 or 2020? I can't remember. Maybe both times. But Fox News has always been on the cutting edge of neocon Inc. They're linked closely with the National Review, constantly had people like Bill Kristol and Charles Krauthammer and all the prominent neocons on there starting and spouting all the neocon propaganda to sell these wars. It is a reflection of the owner in some regard. Obviously, the owner can't directly make input, but they do in terms of the guests they get on, the anchors they get on, and it's pretty clear to see that's the case. And now what's happened is the other cable news networks were co-opted into this neocon vision. The word neocon kind of became a pejorative because everyone felt like that was a disastrous term to label someone because of how disastrous the neocons were, obviously. They created about 5 million deaths in the Middle East in a span of like 30 years or something, and all the terror wars combined. So they're disastrous, bloodthirsty murderers. But that's what Fox News pushes.
And they are elaborately polite, nice people. You know them, Rupert and Lachlan. I mean, they were sitting here. There's no chance you wouldn't like them. And they're interesting, and they're smart, and they're just nice. They're super nice. But we disagree fundamentally on that. And the claws really come out at moments like this. Most of the time it's fine. But when it really comes down to when it's a question of whether U.S. military power will be exerted on behalf of a foreign country thousands of miles from here, they are all in, and anyone who stands in the way will be destroyed. I don't think it's personal, by the way. I like Tom Cotton.
That's pretty telling, man. If there's no other issues that they're going to step in on and really have conflicts with their hosts, except military intervention, you really see where the priorities are. And Tucker has inside info. He worked for the Murdochs and that whole kind of empire for 20 years.
Always like Barry Weiss. Barry Weiss, very charming person. I like all these people. I always like Mark Levin. Like, I got along with him. I mean, he's blowhard, sad personal life and all that, but I was never mad at Mark Levin or Hannity. I like Hannity.
Brilliant constitutional guy.
Yeah, there are great things about all these people. I don't think they hate me personally. They know I'm not working for Qatar. Though I feel like maybe I should be working for Qatar. Like, what the hell at this point? I've never taken a dime from any foreign country or anybody, actually.
In fact, you just bought out, I think it was announced you bought out your investors.
Yeah, I'm not a money guy. I mean, they're projecting. If you could see my house, like, I've made more money than I deserve. but I've not gotten rich, and I don't live like a rich person. Everyone knows that. They're money people. That's why they're projecting, or they're people with opaque motives. My motives are, I'm like autistic about my whole life. I'm totally happy to tell you why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I want to be transparent, and I think pretty much I am. They're the ones who have these weird, complex motives, and so they project onto everyone else the same. Oh, you're getting paid by somebody. You're not sincere. You don't really think that. You're saying it in order to get clicks. Or it's also dumb. And in my case, untrue. You may dislike my views, and you may have good reason to dislike my views, and I understand that. But they're totally sincere.
Yeah, no one can say Tucker isn't sincere, that's for sure. And he's not bound to anyone else's standard. He's not working for anyone. He has his own company now. He's building his own podcast empire, and he's basically the biggest voice in that sphere next to Joe Rogan. So, props to him. The Cotter thing. So the latest psyop, it's been going on for some time, but one of the biggest psyops going on right now is the idea that Cotter has more influence in our government than Israel, which is just insane. So insane. AIPAC controls so many more members of Congress, the deep state. Everyone seems to be aligned by wars that Israel wants. They were now in this war in Iraq, or in Iran. They were in Iraq, Syria, Libya, and basically all of the Middle East wars except for Afghanistan. Basically the whole thing is from Israeli influence and supporting what they're doing in Gaza, which I think is a genocide. I think it's murderous and treacherous, and I'm not going to relent from saying that and exposing that. But yeah, he's totally right that you will be demonized and called a foreign agent if you're against these military wars. It always happens. Opponents of the Vietnam War were called communists routinely. If you were against the war in Iraq, you were called pro-Saddam. You can see what, the Uniparty and the establishment left, especially, I should say, establishment liberals, called people against aiding and abetting Ukraine. They were Putin agents or, Russian agents, Russian spies. It's just so crazy, but that's what always happens.
Anyway, my temptation in a moment like this is to go low and to note that a lot of the people pushing for this stuff have really empty, tormented personal lives. That's true of many in Washington. And that this is a way to kind of feel powerful. I mean, nothing makes you feel more powerful than killing other people. That's the ultimate power. And we talk so much about money and sex, and those are drivers of human behavior, of course. Those are powerful impulses in people to accumulate more of both. But really the ultimate power, the Promethean power, the core power is the power to kill. And when you deny that to people, or you seek to deny that to people, or you raise the point that actually you can't kill people, and that when you do, you will suffer for that. As you said the other day, and I meditated on it in that moment in Matthew. And it's not just in Matthew, it's in John, it's in a number of Gospels, where Jesus scolds Peter for raising the sword in his defense. They're hauling off Jesus to torture him to death for no reason. All he did was heal people. And his closest disciples seeks to defend him with violence, and Jesus scolds him and then gets hauled off to be tortured.
Yeah, how true is this, man? If you kill people as a president, they'll make you a second president. They'll give you a second term. But if you tell the truth about the murderous nature of killing people, you become a traitor or a deviant or an extremist or a conspiracy theorist or a Cotter agent or pro-Putin. That's what you become. Or anti-Semitic. That's the newest one. Of course, that word's now going by the wayside too because people are starting to see through it. That just being a critic of the military-industrial complex and the empire-building schemes isn't enough to qualify someone for that distinction, I'm sorry to say, to many people. But he's right. There is a twisted incentive structure set up where if you're a president, you have more incentive to send people off to die and not suffer political consequences for it than you do to, help people or cut taxes or lessen restrictions or curtail the surveillance state, draw back the deep state agencies or dismantle them completely like the FBI and CIA. No, you benefit more politically by killing people, not only from the Israel lobby, also from the military-industrial complex and all the schemers out there that want this empire building that has just destroyed our way of life in so many ways that aren't directly seen, but are certainly felt by Americans.
They could have made a break. They would have stood up and Jesus wouldn't have been seized and it would all gone on. But he told him right there, live by the sword, die by the sword.
And he scolds him. It's unbelievable. He's mad at Peter. It's just incredible. Anyway, whether or not you believe in Christianity, whether or not you're a Christian, it doesn't matter. It is true that people who espouse violence suffer in the end. They do. I have seen it a lot. And I grew up in a world that espoused violence. That's what the U.S. government does. My dad was involved in it. And I just believe that. And maybe you don't believe that. That's fine. That is my core belief. I sincerely think that.
That's the core nature of government. It's a monopoly on force that has a monopoly on the ability to kill you with impunity. It's essentially what a government is, a monopoly on violence. And the way you can determine, if you don't know what the government is compared to what the government isn't, if it's an entity that is absolved from wrongdoing just because they have a particular badge, and it's a government badge, that's how you know they're the government. Where the laws don't apply, where it's not a country built on the rule of law, where people are exempted. You know, this is qualified immunity in terms of police officers. When they kill people, sometimes they're given a paid leave of absence at times. And look at the Eric Garner situation. They literally have impunity from murdering people when, you know, you or I, if we killed someone, we'd be in jail for that.
But why the hate towards someone who's just like, hey, I'm hard. If you think, and I said this to an Israeli official, if you think I'm anti-Israel, man, you have lost the plot, son. If you think I'm your enemy, not at all. I like Israel. Are you kidding? I've spent a lot of time there. I continue to like it. I pray that Jerusalem is not damaged. I feel so sad for the Israelis who've been killed in the last couple of days and the Iranians who've been killed in the last couple of days, who had nothing to do with any of this. But the point is, if you think that saying, hey, let's focus on my country where I was born, where my family's been for hundreds of years, that was the promise of the last election, please do it. If you think that's hate, you know, you've really lost perspective, I guess is what I would say. But they do think it's hate, and what's happened is what I knew would happen, which is just like, attacks I don't want to deal with that are affecting personal friendships that I care about. The viciousness and the dishonesty is almost unbelievable. Anyway, not to whine. I never whine about stuff like that. It's just that I knew this was going to happen. I didn't want to talk about it at all. I'd much rather talk about immigration. I'd much rather talk about keeping the dollar stores out of rural America. There are all kinds. I'd much rather talk about people taking out loans to buy groceries. These are the declining life expectancy in this country. Fentanyl. I mean, someone else I know just died of fentanyl last week. It's like all of that is now ignored because a leader of a country who does not have majority support in that country, probably 30% support, wants a course of action that includes the United States. And
yeah, it's grim. I mean, I would rather not be talking about this either, but what you have is a country, like he said, with a leader that wants the United States to regime change Iran on his behalf. And also what's ironic about it is it's a country with a secret nuclear weapons program that it won't admit to the world and thus be subject to inspections and IAEA restrictions and such, that is attacking another country because it suspects it has a secret nuclear weapons program. Like, you can't even make this up. If you made this into a story in like an alternative universe or something, I don't think people would believe it. It's just too absurd. But that's what we're dealing with, and I'm with Tucker here.
I just disagree. And anyway, I think it's going to happen. I don't, who cares what I think?
Do you think we're going to join in the
Yes,
combat
I do.
offensive combat
I do.
operation? Well, we can't assume
But
that
these
we have
things
to
are
stop
never
that.
the product of like, look,
We have to stop
you've
that.
actually helped run the governments. I don't need to tell you. You've been there. Decisions like this are never explicitly made. They just sort of happen.
Yes.
It's sort of like living with your girlfriend. Like you wake up hungover one morning and she's there, and then she just kind of doesn't leave, and then the next thing you know, you get married and have kids. Like, that's how most people make decisions.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to Tucker, this was recorded before the U.S. engaged in direct bombing in Iran and before Trump tweeted about regime change, by the way. So in their defense, they don't know yet, but he's making an accurate assessment here that they were going in full bore. And yes, indeed they were. Douglas McGregor called it. He said, I think they've decided already. It's already been decided, and there's nothing you can really do to move Trump off that. Mearsheimer was a little bit skeptical, but props to Tucker. He called it right. And, I think that I don't try to like flout this a lot, but I mostly called it right too, because what I saw is they were moving military units and carrier battle groups into the region. And I didn't necessarily believe that they would do that if it was just all a facade. It just requires a lot of time and resources to do it. It's happened before. You know, the government's very good at wasting taxpayer money, but I just didn't think they were going to go back on this, especially after it turned out. It looked like Trump lulled the Iranians into negotiations under false premises. At least at some point. Maybe it started off legit, but it fell and broke apart, that deal. And it seems to have been because the U.S. changed their strategy to they're asking for something that was a total non-starter, and that's the complete, prohibition on enriching uranium, which would have taken out Iran's possibility of maintaining its nuclear power, which that was never going to happen. Iranians would never have agreed to that.
Just sort of on the basis of facts on the ground. And these things move inexorably toward what they're moving to now, which is full-scale war that includes lots of other countries, either explicitly or not, but the effect is the same. It's a world war. It's a war in which the world is participating.
Well, I think we're in the kinetic part from Ukraine, but today they just moved the carrier battle group from the South China Sea. The Nimitz is heading toward the North Arabian Sea.
Yeah.
So they've got the tankers have flown over there. So we're pre-positioning the assets,
of course,
to get involved. And you think that?
Yeah, that's why I thought that this would happen too.
This is going to happen. There's no way we can stop it.
It's too. I mean, I think there are ways to stop it. Oh, you are such a nice person. Sorry, I needed the sacred beverage. No, of course there are ways to stop it. It's just that unless you take, it's like gaining weight, which I have, lived with. It's like unless you are a crazy person devoted to being thin, you will get fatter in your 50s. Like you have to take active steps to prevent the inevitable, something that is inevitable otherwise. And in this case, what's inevitable, absent those active monomaniacal steps, toward preventing it is a much larger war. It's too easy to pull the United States into. We have too many assets in that region. We're too dependent on the energy from that region. International oil markets are. I mean, there's so many things that could go wrong. Actually, as horrifying as the exchange between Israel and Iran has been, horrifying in the sense that innocents have died, which, let me remind you, is horrifying, always and everywhere.
No, Tel
we have to
Aviv's
believe
got
that.
hit. Tehran's got hit. Civilians are dead.
In both places.
Right.
And if we don't think that that's sad, then we're not fully human. Like, you have to believe that's sad, and you have to really mean it.
Totally agree with him here. I'm so glad he's making this point, is that life is valuable universally. And if you believe that, then you should believe that innocent Iranians caught up in this thing don't deserve to die over it. That means that you should believe that innocent Israelis caught up in this thing shouldn't deserve to die for it. U.S. servicemen in the region shouldn't deserve to die from it. These are squabbles between nation states, between governments of nation states that don't involve the common person that doesn't want to wage them. In fact, the common person that doesn't want to wage these wars is usually so far removed from the decision-making process and the incentives that call for them and encourage them that it really is quite depressing. So I've been praying for U.S. servicemen that they don't get hit or a false flag attack doesn't befall them and drag U.S. boots on the ground into Iran and spur that. I've been praying for innocent Israelis and innocent Iranians that they don't die in massive numbers needlessly, because it's already happened, of course, but it just doesn't need to continue. This war doesn't have to happen, but our rulers have decided otherwise.
Whether or not you can hate the Iranian government, I'm not for the Iranian government, but if you don't see the death of innocents anywhere as sad, then you are gravely diminished. Certainly not Christian. Anyway, whatever. But there are so many ways to pull the United States into this, and the incentives to pull the U.S. in are so profound. I guess if I could just say one political thing, watching Donald Trump, who of course you know very well, who I think at core is sincere about peace. I mean,
big time.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Big time. I mean, that's real. Watching him done so wrong. The lies. Oh, he knew all along. The peace process was fake. Steve Witkoff was playing along. That is a lie. That's a lie. I know. That's a lie. Those guys meant it.
Bald-faced lie.
It's a total lie. And all these people that Mark Levin and all of the minions who are running cover for a foreign government, they're all telling that same lie. And I feel for President Trump, and I think I don't know this. I'm just guessing, but at this point, I feel like he just has to kind of roll with it. What do you say? You don't want to get in an argument about that right in the middle of a war.
No, I think he reiterated last night that we got to get back to the peace part. They got to lay down the guns.
But they're lying about him. He sincerely, even now, he sincerely believes, whether he's right or not, I can't say, but that this could be a predicate to a peace deal.
Yeah, I hate to question that, but it just doesn't seem like it jives with some of the information that's happened. We had 24 to 48 warnings for people going into various locations around the country before this happened. It looks like he was aware of the strike, at least at some point. And the U.S. negotiating team changed their ask from no nuclear weapons program to no uranium enrichment, which was a swift change that they had to have known would not bear any fruit, that had to have sabotaged it. And it seems like for several days in advance, at least, Trump knew and was working with Netanyahu on this strike and maybe on the overall strategy, saying, hey, we'll come in a few days later and bomb. I have no reason to doubt Tucker doesn't believe what he's saying regarding those negotiations, but I don't think that it jives with some of the information that we've gotten from these negotiations. And especially the fact in Trump's speech last night, it was about a 4-minute speech talking about this mission, this first bombing campaign that they did on these 3 nuclear sites. He said, he implied that he was working with Netanyahu on this. How far that goes back, I guess that's to anyone's judgment, but if we're to infer a little bit, it seems like he was aware of this in advance, and this didn't, catch him by surprise. It's hard for me to believe that Netanyahu would just do this just blankly and hope Trump aligns with him, although, that's a pretty big certainty that the U.S. president is going to align with whatever the prime minister of Israel, especially Netanyahu, wants to do. But I don't think that's how it played out, even though Tucker, I know, is earnest. And I do think Witkoff is a more, of a peacemaker voice within the administration, but it wasn't enough to overcome the Kellogg's of the world, the Mike Waltzes when he was in the administration of the world, the Marco Rubios of the world, the Miriam Adelsons of the world that wanted to push Trump in this direction the entire time.
We're seeing now, he really thinks that and wants that, and the other side is just like, no, a peace deal is immoral.
It's the other side, but the other side also has the apparatus here. This is what happened
in
Ukraine,
the U.S.
when Ukraine attacked. Yes. When Ukraine attacked, we still haven't asked Ratcliffe, was the CIA involved? There's zero probability Ukraine could attack that deep into Russia without some involvement here.
Especially in a mission that supposedly took 18 months to plan and execute.
Exact same thing. Why was Tulsi Gabbard not invited to the Camp David meeting all day?
You know why.
Why Tulsi Gabbard still to the American public has said the last public statement is that the program was not back up and running. And now we have from...
This was recorded a few days before that, apparently, but she came out a day before the bombing campaign. I don't think the timing was that coincidental, by the way, to throw all her support behind what Trump wanted to do in Iran and, suddenly say that Iran was weeks away from acquiring a nuke. She turned. I don't know why. Maybe she's compromised. Probably is. It seems like war propaganda to me. Someone twisted her mind in terms of this. She got shaken and she went along with it. That is what I think. I hate to say it. She's not the worst member of the cabinet by far, but there was. Take a look at that tweet from the day before this bombing campaign. It did not have the same air of confidence regarding Iran not having restarted their program as she did when she tweeted that.
From Bibi by himself on Fox by Brent Baer, that the thing was 12 to 13 months away. It wasn't this weekend.
I know.
And this is by his own thing. And we also know that it was a decapitation, as we said on Friday. It wasn't just about the nuclear program. It's a decapitation of total leadership. So this is a total regime change, which, by the way, you may have a plan for regime change, is fine, but you got to bring the American people along. Let me go back.
By the way, I said that publicly last week. This is the point of this is regime change. I know everyone involved. I know. I'm telling the truth.
Yeah.
I have no weird motive here at all. I don't hate Israel. I'm not.
Plus, you know the players, and you went to, and you know the Iraq situation.
This isn't a regime change effort, and why not just say that? And
well, Trump's finally said it, Tucker. I know you didn't see that at the time, but he's come out and essentially said it. So you were right. We were right. Everyone that always said it was a regime change the whole time, and it wasn't about the nuclear weapons program whatsoever, turned out to be right. It seems to be.
But you're a Holocaust denier for saying that. Stop. Let's have a rational conversation about what our aims are here. And maybe you can convince me that we need to support a regime change war in Iran. Tell me how that plays out in a country of 90 million people. Have you thought it through? Do you even care? And the answer is no. We have a economic and political and demographic crisis in Europe because of U.S.-backed, Israel-backed
Syria
wars in the Middle East.
Yeah.
That's what's destroyed Europe, where my ancestors came from. And I spend a lot of time there, and I love European culture, which is Christian culture. And it's destroyed that. And shut up, you're not allowed to care. Who's making the rules here?
Well, I'm a little bit more hard-headed than Tucker, because whatever you say to me, you will not convince me to support another regime change war in the Middle East. So, Tucker's got a good nature to him. He's jovial and kind of open-minded in many regards. And that's a great quality that you don't find from a lot of people of his stature. So I appreciate that about him. I'll just say that as a tangent, but it's reflected in basically all of his work, I would say. It's one of the reasons why he's so likable.
I don't hate anyone. I don't see conflict with anyone at all. I have no weird biases. All my biases are out in the open. But I really resent being told who my enemy, especially with foreigners. Some foreigner shows up and tells you who your enemies are. Really? I've been here a long time. I live across from my parents' graves. You can't tell me who America's enemies are. At least I have a right to weigh in on that also. Oh, shut up, says Mark Dubowitz or something. It's like, are you even from here? Who are you anyway?
Yeah, but he's right. The Israeli government and AIPAC and Netanyahu constantly is telling America who their enemies are. Well, it's not really that. It's that's your enemy, and you want our resources, our money, our manpower, and our blood to do a regime change operation. That's what Netanyahu wants.
This is so bonkers. I don't hate Mark Dubowitz. I don't hate his agenda. What I hate, I disagree with his agenda. I'm not mad at him. I'm not mad at any of these people fundamentally. But what I seek is an honest, open, transparent conversation about what we're doing and why. And I don't think that's too much to ask for, considering it's my tax dollars and my money that you're seeking to use to achieve it. If that's radical, then, we've distorted the terms beyond recognition.
Totally right. Totally on board with what Tucker and Steve said about empire building. It's disastrous, and getting involved in another war in the Middle East is particularly disastrous right now, especially as there's, inflation concerns, the bond market or the treasury market might be destroyed. Groceries and gas still cost Americans a lot of money. You got, college tuition at the highest rates ever because of how involved the government is with that. Healthcare, etc. Government's super involved in that too. What do you know? What a coincidence. And we really could focus a lot more on domestic issues. And I don't have the same policy prescriptions as either Tucker or Steve does in terms of domestic issues, but I would much rather focus on those matters than overseas forever wars that have never borne fruit, that have never been good for the American taxpayer, and are America last and Israel first to the core. And that's what we're seeing in this regime change operation. It's broken out since this podcast. And, despite my reservations and dispute with what Tucker said about these negotiations and that they were earnest, I do think they started off earnest, actually. I do think these were the foreign policy objectives of the United States, but Netanyahu couldn't take it because he wanted to remove the pretext that justifies his regime change. That nuclear weapon thing, the same thing he's lied about for 30 years, saying it's weeks, months, days away. You might as well say it's negative 20 years away at this point. No one buys into it except for those duped by the military-industrial complex and those doing these forever wars. And Trump is culpable. I'm sorry. So whether you think he was being twisted by some deep-seated influence in the deep state or not, it doesn't seem to be the case. It seems like he has the ultimate decision-making power here, and he's not making the right decision. That's what we're seeing. And it's a calamity. I think that the worst scenario is that U.S. troops get attacked, then the U.S. puts boots on the ground for another occupation, maybe a 20-year style one like we saw in Afghanistan or Iraq. It would just be disastrous. We can't take it, and I really hope it doesn't expand beyond what it is now. But I do want to hear from you. Is Tucker right regarding the negotiations? Do you agree with Tucker and Steve regarding empire building and the follies of U.S. involvement in the war? And is there any way, even though the U.S. has now bombed Iran, is there any way to get off of this thing and establish peace from here? Or are we too deep in? all the way now for that to happen. Let me know down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Please consider becoming a YouTube member or Patreon patron to support the channel, and I'd really appreciate that, and bow to you if you help. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.